leather jacket needs to be relined. It's very tattered on the inside. I'll show you how to go about doing that. Also, by comparison, I'm going to show you how I would reline this suede jacket. It doesn't actually need to be relined, but it's a more typical situation, so I want to show it to you. Also, I don't want you to be put off by the idea of relining suede or leather. These principles that I'm going to show to you are what you would apply to a fabric jacket. Okay, nice jacket, but it's a mess on the inside. It's almost completely torn away at the neck and collar. It's otherwise frayed all around. It seems to be fine, oh no, not quite, at the underarms. It's coming apart. So we're just going to go ahead and reline the whole thing. How I will begin is by detaching the old lining from the leather jacket. I'll begin up here where it is already frayed at the neck, release all along here, on the bottom, all the way. I'm sort of hesitating over what I will do at the zipper area. If I release this lining at the zipper area, that will also loosen and set free the zipper, which ideally I would like to leave that intact. So I might come up with a plan B about how to handle that. Now let's look at the suede jacket by comparison. The suede jacket doesn't involve a zipper, and we're not going to be running into any hardware at all. So I would start up at the neck, all along the inner lapel, set free all along here, through the hem area, all the way across, back up the lapel, into the neck. Plus, we can't forget our sleeve that we'll free at the bottom of. Releasing along the waistband ribbing. Leaves the leather intact to the ribbing, but we're getting the lining free. Up here at the neck where it's torn, it looks like somebody already did try to piece on a piece to the lining and then hand sewed it along this edge here, but it gave way, you see, and so now something much more permanent and stable needs to happen here. So having released this area that someone patched and seeing how tattered it is here, I'm actually just going to snip away the lining as best I can from where it has been sewn on, but it has torn away. There's also hardware here that I'm just going to snip around, because really I'm going to use this old lining for a pattern, and I'll go over how to perfect that pattern later, even though this ripped out lining itself is certainly not perfect. So I'm just going to keep snipping along. And then I'm going to go back down here to one side of the zipper. That's because, you see, it's all released on the bottom at the waist ribbing, and we did our best at the top, as you saw at the collar, and I have decided to cut with the pinking shears approximately, a half an inch away from that zipper. Why am I doing this? This is going to be the seam allowance that I'm going to attach the new lining to, so that I don't have to deal with separating the zipper out, since we discovered that the way they sewed on the lining also sews in the zipper. So while that was expedient for them to do when they made this jacket initially, it really kind of hangs me up. So I've decided that this is my shortcut. And I'll just snip carefully along here. And all this will end up being in a seam allowance with the new lining. It will look very nice and fresh. So again, all released at the bottom here. I did manage to cut all the way up the side with the pinking shears, leaving kind of a ragged looking but nevertheless substantial seam allowance for the new lining that I'll make a pattern from this old ragged rugged stuff. I did snip around the snap area. When I get up to this corner here later on, I will have to sew that in by hand, and then back up to the collar where we know we're going to sew by machine on my power machine. So I'll do the same thing on the other side. I'll snip around this area, cut a 1/2 inch away with the pinking shears from this side of the zipper until we're free again down at the bottom. I've also decided that's going to be my same tactic down here at the sleeve. This is just going to be too tight of a quarters to sew in on my flatbed power machine. So I'm going to do the same thing and leave a 1/2 inch seam allowance to just sew by hand, most likely, the new sleeve lining onto, which will be much nicer and much cleaner than this existing. There, see how that's freed up, and now we can get the jacket out of it. That's what it looks like. And this is what a leather jacket looks like without its lining. Pretty lonesome for a new lining, don't you think? On the old lining, I do like this old tag, though. We're going to preserve that and detach it and put it on the new piece of lining, which is going to be this fresh brown piece. I think it matches the brown of the leather magnificently. So we are going to have ourselves a splendid, brand new looking leather jacket. Make sure to cut your pieces generously. It's much better to have pieces that are too large than too small. Here are your side pieces, your back piece, and your sleeve pieces. Time to sew. I'm going to start with the shoulder seams. I'm sewing 1/2 inch seams, and I'm sewing on the home sewing machine right now. Press those seams open. Next, I'm going to sew back on that fun tag. Next, I'm going to deal with the sleeve, where I allowed that 1/2 inch or so of the old lining to exist from the cuff. And I'm going to take the new lining piece, the sleeve that is, the straight bottom of it, and with right sides together, I'm going to pin this piece on. And I'm going to leave free the seam allowance right here on the new piece, match it up to the seam allowance on the old piece, and I'm going to pin this all the way around. Now that I've pinned all the way around this sleeve, and it is awkward going and it took a few minutes, it kind of looks like an extension of the leather sleeve. What's going to happen is, once it's sewn around the edge here, it will all fold back nicely into the new sleeve lining. For ease of sewing now, I pulled that sleeve lining to the inside of the leather, and I'll sew around now. The object will be to sew as closely as possible to that existing seam of the old lining. By using a zipper presser foot, I was able to get up very close to the ribbing cuff. Looks good. And then over here where the seam is, we'll be sewing this seam up later and neatening this area up. And it's of no consequence to my mind that this little bit of old lining shows, because it will never show on the outside because of the ribbing cuff. You of course can opt to take all of this apart and deal with the leather at this point too. That would be rough going in my opinion, so that's why we've gone with this plan. This is the back of the jacket. I now have the cuffs attached to the lining on both sleeves. I want to now attach the back and the side pieces to the sleeve before I would ever sew the side seams. How am I going to do that? Well, I'll choose one side, any side, and the first side, I will admit, will probably be easier than the other side, but I will match the shoulder seam to the center of the sleeve cap. With right sides together and working with the curves, everything came together, except I had a little excess at the center. That's okay. Remember, we cut generously. Everything matches. Make sure everything matches actually at the sides. And if you need to compensate, do so at the center and just make a nice little couple of pleats up at the top of the sleeve cap. Those will look nice, and they'll be extra roomy. It'll just be a little extra roomy in the lining, and we want that. So I'll see if I can get a close-up photo of how I nicely pleated everything here. So here we are. There's the sleeve cuff. And here's how that pleat ended up at the sleeve cap. Very nice. Here's where we are. We've got the sleeve caps and the sleeve cuffs nicely covered at this time. We're still undone at the underarms and side seams. That's on purpose. Now I'm interested in getting over to the power machine and connecting up the neck area. Let's get right sides together. This is when I'm glad I know where the center back is of the lining, because I pressed a seam and centered the tag over it. Find the center back of the collar, which is where the hang tab is. Now I have my point of reference to connect. There. After taking out quite a bit of top stitching along the back of the collar here, I was able to get up close to the seam at the neck, and now we have it attached to the lining at the neck. Very nice. Next, I want to attach the bottom of the lining to the top of the rib knit waist. So having flipped things around and now right sides together once again, flip up the rib knit, know where your center is, center of your lining, and we're going to sew along here all the way across. Okay, we have everything quite inside out and topsy-turvy and all sandwiched in. We're still open at the side seams, but trust me when I say we are pinned in at the bottom. We're going to be sewing at the side, stop, all across the back, stop, the other side. We're stopping because we need to make sure we have stopped and allowed for side seams. Here, I'll tell you what, if you're confused, you're not alone. But this is the way it is sometimes, is you just go by feel what the next thing is to do. We'll get it. Okay, we've arrived at the bottom. By stretching the rib knit waist as I went along, I was able to get the lining sewn on. Now we're still free at the side seams, clear to the underarms. Also by the zipper we're still free. We're going to do this part next. We're going to connect next to the zippers on each side. Next. And in order to do that, that means reaching through this free side seam, turning everything inside out into confusion yet again, and finding that 1/2 inch pinked edge that we left. So we're going to connect everything up right here, all the way down. As anticipated, I will have to do handwork, just a little bit of it, in the 4 corners of this jacket. But as you can see, we are now in at the zipper. Looks good. All that remains now are the 2 side seams. One will be done the normal way, one will have to do a kind of a different way, but first, the one that we're going to do the normal way, somehow or other get the right sides together of the sleeve by turning it inside out, pin together, and we'll sew that up. The final seam has to be done in a certain way from the outside. Why? Because we had to turn everything right side out finally from somewhere by reaching in and turning it right side out, and that was through this side seam. So by pinching together, and I do mean pinching together the seam and pinning it, we're going to end up sewing alongside here narrowly and make a little bit of a ridge of a seam. Also remember, this was a continuous seam that went through the sleeve. Well, the sleeve I did normally up until I got to where it all meets underneath here. That's when I turned everything right side out, and now we're making this little bit of a ridge that we're going to sew together. This is the resulting ridge seam then. So why then did I show you this incredibly difficult reline job of a leather jacket, tedious even? That's because I wanted you to appreciate that suede jacket I showed you in the beginning. By comparison, that would be much easier because it's a more traditional and typical reline job. Simply by taking it apart at the lining, making pattern pieces out of the lining, cutting them out from new lining fabric, sewing it up, putting right sides together of the jacket and the lining, sew it all on, flip it right side out, and you've got yourself a reline job. Besides which, you can use these sewing steps for blazers and suit coats, besides jackets and coats. Okay, let's examine this reline job inside out. All done. Good job. Here's what the suede jacket looks like inside out. All it is a matter of putting right sides together, of lining to jacket, whatever the jacket is made out of. Sewing all the way around, making sure to leave one seam open so that you can turn everything right side out again. Sew up the loose seam in the end. That's your last step. Then you're finished.